The transport plane touched down at Colorado Springs with a mechanical thud that shook me awake. I straightened my uniform and checked my watch. 1,400 hours, exactly on time. Through the small window, I could see the familiar mountains rising beyond the base, and my heart hammered against my ribs. 18 months. 18 months of sand, heat, and counting down days until I could see Alexander's face again, until I could hug my parents, until I could be someone other than Staff Sergeant Thompson. I gathered my gear and walked down the ramp with the other returning soldiers, scanning the small crowd of families waiting behind the fence. My eyes moved over crying spouses, excited children holding welcome home signs, parents clutching each other as they waited for their sons and daughters. But Alexander wasn't there. Neither were my parents. Neither was Sophia. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crowd thinned as soldiers found their families, and still I stood there, duffel bag heavy on my shoulder, phone buzzing with what I assumed were messages saying they were running late. Traffic, maybe? Card trouble? Something simple and fixable. Staff Sergeant Thompson. The voice behind me was crisp, professional. I turned to see Lieutenant Colonel Diana Foster, my commanding officer, walking toward me with an expression I couldn't read. She wasn't supposed to be here. COs didn't typically meet returning soldiers unless something was wrong. "Ma'am," I said, snapping to attention. "At ease, Thompson. We need to talk." She gestured toward the administration building, my office. The walk across the tarmac felt like a funeral march. Other soldiers were loading into cars with their families, voices full of laughter and relief, while I followed my commanding officer into a sterile building that smelled of industrial cleaner and bureaucracy. Her office was exactly as I remembered it. American flag in the corner, commendations on the wall, a photo of her own family on the desk. "Sit down, Thompson." Colonel Foster closed the door behind us and took her seat behind the desk. "I'm going to be direct, because that's what you deserve. Your family believes you're dead." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Ma'am?" "6 months ago, your family contacted the Red Cross claiming they hadn't heard from you in 3 months. They were told that communication blackouts happened, that it didn't necessarily mean anything, but they persisted. Eventually, they filed a missing person report and began telling people you were missing in action, presumed dead." I stared at her, my training keeping me upright when everything inside me wanted to collapse. But I sent letters, care packages. I called when I could get satellite access. "I know." She opened a folder on her desk. "Chaplain Bennett has been documenting every communication you attempted to send home. We have records, Thompson. Detailed records." My phone buzzed again. Without thinking, I pulled it out and opened social media for the first time in months. The first thing I saw was a photo posted by my mother 2 days ago. Alexander in a black tuxedo standing next to Sophia in a white wedding dress. My sister. My fiancé. The caption read, "Celebrating love rising from tragedy. Jemima would have wanted them to find happiness together." I must have made a sound because Colonel Foster leaned forward. "Thompson?" I turned the phone toward her, my hand surprisingly steady. She looked at the photo, then back at me, her jaw tight. "I'm sorry, Staff Sergeant Thompson. I'm so goddamn sorry." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, I could hear cars starting, families driving away to celebrate homecomings that I would never have. Inside, I felt something cold and calculating take hold. The same feeling I got during combat, when emotions became a luxury I couldn't afford. "Ma'am," I said finally, "I need to know everything, and I need access to Chaplain Bennett's records." Colonel Foster nodded. "Already arranged. Thompson, I want you to know that the military will support you in whatever you decide to do. This is unconscionable." I stood, shouldering my duffel bag again. "Thank you, ma'am. But this isn't the military's fight. It's mine." As I walked to the chaplain's office, my phone continued buzzing with notifications. More wedding photos. Congratulations from people I'd grown up with. Comments about how tragic but beautiful it was that love could bloom from loss. They had already buried me, mourned me, and moved on. They'd erased me from my own life while I was serving my country. But they'd forgotten something important about me. I was a soldier. And soldiers don't just lie down and die because it's convenient for other people. Chaplain Thomas Bennett's office was a sanctuary of quiet efficiency tucked behind the base chapel. Unlike the sterile military offices, this space held warmth. Wooden crosses on the walls, family photos, a coffee maker that actually worked. When I knocked on his door at 0800 the next morning, he looked up from his desk with eyes that held the weight of too many difficult conversations. "Staff Sergeant Thompson," he said, rising to shake my hand. "I've been expecting you. Please, sit down." I'd known Chaplain Bennett peripherally before my deployment. He'd counseled soldiers through divorces, deaths, and the thousand small crises that came with military life. But I'd never needed his services. My family had been solid, supportive. My faith had been in them, not God. He opened a thick manila folder on his desk. 18 months of records. Every letter you wrote, every care package you sent, every phone call you tried to make through official channels. He pulled out a photograph. This was the first package you sent home, 2 weeks after you arrived in Afghanistan. Christmas gifts for your family. The photo showed a cardboard box wrapped in brown paper, my careful handwriting addressing it to my parents' house. I remembered that package. A scarf for my mother, a book about Navy history for my dad, perfume for Sophia, and a small jewelry box for Alexander that contained my grandmother's wedding ring, the one I'd planned to use for our ceremony. "Did they receive it?" I asked. "According to postal records, yes. All of your packages were delivered and signed for." He pulled out more photos. Valentine's Day package, your mother's birthday package, Easter, your father's birthday, all delivered. My throat tightened. And the letters? 47 letters total. I kept copies because I could tell how important staying connected was to you. He handed me a stack of photocopied pages in my own handwriting. "Would you like me to read some of the early ones?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Dear Mom and Dad," he began, reading from a letter dated 3 months into my deployment. "Afghanistan is everything you'd expect and nothing like you'd imagine. The heat is brutal, but the people are strong and kind when they're not shooting at us. I miss home terribly, especially Sunday dinners and Mom's terrible jokes. Alex, if you're reading this over their shoulders, stop it and write me your own letter. I love you all and can't wait to come home." The words I'd written in a dusty tent half a world away sounded foreign now, naive in their assumption that love was mutual, that family meant something. "There's more," Chaplain Bennett said gently. "Private Johnson worked with you on social media outreach, didn't she?" As if summoned, there was a knock on the door. Private Samantha Johnson entered, tablet in hand, looking nervous but determined. At 22, Sam was everything I'd been at her age, eager, loyal, believing in the system. She'd helped me navigate technology that changed while we were deployed, showing me how to use apps and platforms to stay connected with home. "Sergeant Thompson," she said, sitting down across from me, "I brought screenshots." She opened her tablet and showed me months of attempts I'd made to contact my family through social media, friend requests to my parents that were ignored, messages to Sophia that showed as read but never answered, comments on family photos that were deleted, posts on my own account that were never acknowledged. "I helped you set up that video call for your dad's birthday. Remember? You waited for 2 hours, but no one joined." I do remember. I'd sat in the communications tent, staring at an empty video chat screen while other soldiers talked to their families around me. I'd told myself they'd forgotten, that something had come up. It never occurred to me that they thought I was dead. "There's something else," Sam said, swiping to a new screen. "I found this yesterday." She showed me Sophia's Facebook from 6 months ago. Photos of her looking devastated, posts about grief and loss, friends commenting about how strong she was being during such a tragedy.
Then gradually, posts about healing and finding light in darkness. Photos of her and Alexander became more frequent, more intimate. When did they get married? I asked. 3 months ago. But they announced their engagement 5 months ago. While you were, she gestured to the timeline, while I was still writing letters they weren't answering. I stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over the training grounds. Other soldiers were running PT, their voices carrying across the morning air. Normal military life, the kind that I thought I was coming home to. Sergeant? Sam's voice was hesitant. What are you going to do? I turned back to them, feeling that cold calculation settle deeper into my bones. I'm going to find out exactly how deep this goes, and then I'm going to make sure they understand what they've done.
Chaplain Bennett closed the folder. I'll provide whatever documentation you need. This is not just betrayal, Thompson. This is fraud. They held a memorial service, accepted sympathy, let people believe you were dead while you were serving your country. They erased me, I said quietly. But they forgot something important. What's that? Sam asked. I picked up my copy of the communication records, evidence of 18 months of attempted love sent into a void of deliberate silence. They forgot that I'm very good at being patient, and I'm very good at war. The drive from Colorado to New Mexico gave me 8 hours to think, plan, and prepare for what I was about to see. I'd changed into civilian clothes, jeans, a baseball cap pulled low, and chosen a rental car that would blend into traffic. The Sunset Motel on the outskirts of my hometown was exactly the kind of place where no one asked questions and paid in cash was welcomed with gratitude. My hometown looked smaller than I remembered, the way places do when you've seen the world beyond them. The high school where I'd been valedictorian, the diner where I'd worked summers, the park where Alexander had proposed. All of it seemed like artifacts from someone else's life, which, I suppose, they were now. I'd mapped out the surveillance carefully, my parents' house first, then the home Alexander and I had picked out together before my deployment, then the places my family frequented. I needed to understand the scope of their new reality before I decided how to shatter it. My parents' house sat on Maple Street, the same blue 2-story where I'd grown up. But something was different. The garden my mother had always neglected was immaculate, full of roses and carefully arranged flowers. A new car sat in the driveway, a silver SUV that definitely hadn't been there when I left. Through the front window, I could see into the living room where family photos lined the mantelpiece. Photos that no longer included me. I sat in my rental car for 3 hours, watching. My mother, Grace, came out to water the garden, humming softly to herself. She looked content, peaceful even. When Mrs. Henderson from next door came over to chat across the fence, I rolled down my window to listen. "How's Sophia doing with the pregnancy?" Mrs. Henderson asked. "Oh, wonderfully," my mother replied, her voice warm with pride. "She's glowing, and Alexander is so attentive. It's like watching new love bloom from tragedy, you know? Sometimes I think Jemima brought them together from wherever she is now." I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. Jemima brought them together. As if I was some benevolent ghost orchestrating my replacement. "Such a blessing," Mrs. Henderson agreed, "after everything you've all been through. First losing Jemima, then watching these two find each other. It's like a movie." "We're just grateful," my mother said. "Sophia has been so strong through everything. She's been the glue holding this family together." After Mrs. Henderson left, I followed my mother's car when she drove to the grocery store. I walked through the aisles behind her, close enough to hear her humming, to see her checking items off a list written in Sophia's handwriting. She bought prenatal vitamins, ginger tea, and the expensive ice cream Sophia had always preferred. At the checkout, she chatted with the cashier about her expecting daughter and how excited they all were about the baby. Not once did she mention that this expecting daughter had married her other daughter's fiancé. Next, I drove to the house Alexander and I had chosen together, the small craftsman on Elm Street with the wraparound porch and the oak tree in the front yard. We'd planned to hang a swing from that tree for our future children. Now, there was a different kind of swing there, a porch swing where Alexander and Sophia sat together as the sun set.
I parked across the street and watched them through binoculars I borrowed from base equipment. Sophia's pregnancy was obvious now. She was maybe 6 months along, her hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. Alexander sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, occasionally leaning down to kiss the top of her head. They looked happy, comfortable, like a couple who'd been together for years instead of months. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Jemima's room is ready for the baby. Come see. Sophia." The text wasn't meant for me. It was meant for someone in her contacts, someone who would celebrate this milestone with her. But seeing my own name used so casually, as if I were just a memory to be repurposed, sent ice through my veins. I drove to my parents' house and used the spared key they'd always kept under the fake rock by the back door. The house was empty. I had watched them all leave in different directions an hour ago. Inside, everything was familiar, yet wrong, like walking through a museum of my former life. The living room photos confirmed what I'd glimpsed from outside. My graduation pictures were gone. The family portrait from 2 Christmases ago had been replaced by one that included only my parents, Sophia, and Alexander. On the mantel where my military commendation had once sat, there was now a framed photo of Sophia in a wedding dress. But the second floor broke something inside me. My childhood bedroom, the room where I'd studied for the SATs, the room where I'd dreamed of military service, the room where I'd written letters to Alexander during basic training, had been completely transformed. The walls were painted soft yellow, a crib sat where my desk used to be, baby clothes hung in the closet where my high school uniforms had once been stored.
They had erased me so thoroughly that my own room no longer existed. I sat on the floor where my bed used to be and pulled out my phone, scrolling through Sophia's social media. The posts told a story of tragedy transformed into triumph. Photos of her looking brave and sad at my memorial service. Pictures of her and Alexander finding comfort in shared grief. Their engagement announcement, which spoke of love growing from loss and how Jemima would want us to be happy. But it was the baby announcement that made my hands shake with rage. A photo of an ultrasound with the caption, "Baby Thompson Williams due in December. We know Aunt Jemima is watching over us from heaven. She always wanted to be an aunt, and now she will be in spirit. Our little miracle is proof that love conquers all." Aunt Jemima? My nephew or niece would grow up thinking their aunt was a dead war hero instead of their mother's sister, who was very much alive and very much betrayed. I was still sitting in what used to be my room when I heard the front door open downstairs. Voices carried up, my father James and Alexander, talking in low tones about baby furniture and cribs. "Sophia wants the rocking chair from the attic," Alexander was saying, "the one that was Jemima's when she was a baby." "Of course," my father replied, but his voice sounded strained. "Whatever she needs." There was a pause, then Alexander asked, "Do you ever wonder if we're doing the right thing?" Another pause, longer this time. When my father spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Every day. But wondering doesn't change anything now." "She would have understood, wouldn't she? Jemima, I mean. She would have wanted us to be happy." "Don't." My father's voice was sharp now. "Don't make this about what she would have wanted. Make it about what you're choosing now." I crept to the top of the stairs, listening as their voices moved toward the kitchen. "Your wife needs you to be present, not constantly justifying yourself with the ghost of my daughter." Wife. Alexander was married to Sophia. My fiancé was married to my sister, living in the house we'd chosen together, preparing for a baby they'd created while I was overseas. And my father, the one person who might have fought for truth, had let it happen. But his words suggested something else. Doubt, guilt, maybe even regret. Of all my family members, Dad was the one who understood military service, who knew what deployment meant. If anyone had questioned the story of my disappearance, it would have been him. I slipped out the back door while they were still talking and drove back to my motel room. The surveillance had given me intelligence, but it had also given me something else. The devastating confirmation that they weren't just moving on from my supposed death, they were thriving in my absence. Sophia was pregnant and glowing. Alexander was playing the devoted husband. My mother was planning for grandchildren. They'd built a new family on the foundation of my erasure. And it was working beautifully for everyone involved, except the ghost they thought I was. I opened my laptop and began documenting everything I'd observed, adding it to the growing file of evidence. Dates, times, conversations, photos. The case against them was building. But more than that, I was building something else. A strategy. A plan. A way to make them understand exactly what they'd done and exactly what it would cost them. They'd declared me dead and moved on with their lives, but they've forgotten something crucial about war. Sometimes the dead come back. And when they do, they're not usually in a forgiving mood. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Back in my motel room, I stared at my phone for 20 minutes before finally dialing the number I knew by heart. Rachel Martinez had been my best friend since middle school, my maid in honor, the person who knew me better than anyone, except maybe Alexander. If anyone had tried to stay in contact during my deployment, it would have been her. The phone rang 3 times before her familiar voice answered, professional and crisp. Martinez Legal Aid, this is Rachel. Ray? It's me. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Jemima! Jemima, is this really you? It's really me. I heard something crash in the background like she had dropped her coffee mug. Oh my God. Oh my God, Jemima, where are you? Are you safe? I thought you were dead. We all thought you were dead. The relief in her voice was genuine, so different from the calculated grief I'd witnessed from my family. It was the first real emotion anyone had shown about my supposed death, and it nearly broke me. I'm alive, Ray. I've been alive this whole time. I just got back from deployment yesterday. Deployment? But your family said... She trailed off, and I could practically hear her legal mind putting pieces together. Jemima, what the hell is going on? Can you meet me somewhere private? I'll explain everything.
I tried to find you, she said before we even sat down. When your family said you'd gone missing, I contacted the Red Cross, the military, everyone I could think of. But your family insisted you'd asked for no contact with your old life, that you wanted a clean break. They told you that? Your mother called me personally, said you'd been struggling with PTSD, that you'd specifically requested no communication with anyone from home because it was too painful. She begged me to respect your wishes and stop trying to reach you. I stared at her across the laminated table. And you believed her? Rachel flinched. I wanted to keep looking, but they were so convincing, and they showed me things. What things? She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old messages. Text messages, they said, were from you. Look. She showed me a conversation thread from 8 months ago, messages that appeared to come from my number, telling Rachel that I needed space, that contact with home was making my depression worse, that I'd found peace in isolation and needed everyone to respect that. I never sent these, I said quietly. I know that now. The writing style is all wrong. You never use proper punctuation in texts, and these are written like formal letters. Rachel leaned forward. Jemima, I think your family has been intercepting your communications. They've been actively preventing people from contacting you. Over the next hour, I told her everything. The deployment, the letters, the chaplain's records, the wedding, the pregnancy. Rachel listened with the focused attention she brought to legal cases, occasionally asking clarifying questions, taking notes on napkins. This is fraud, she said finally. Identity theft at minimum. If they claimed any benefits related to your supposed death, it could be criminal fraud. If they intercepted mail, that's a federal crime. Can we prove it? With the military records, absolutely. But Jemima, you need to think carefully about how far you want to take this. Once we start legal proceedings, there's no going back. Your relationship with your family will be over. I thought about my mother watering her perfect garden, humming while she planned for a grandchild who would never know their real aunt. I thought about Sophia, sleeping in the bed I'd shared with Alexander, wearing the ring he'd given me, carrying a baby they'd conceived while I was writing them love letters from a war zone. My relationship with my family ended the moment they decided I was dead. I just didn't know it yet." Rachel nodded slowly. "Then we need more evidence. Phone records, financial records, anything that shows a pattern of deception, and we need to document their current fraud before you reveal yourself." "There's something else," I said. "I need to contact my father." "Why?" "Because he's the only one who showed any doubt. When I was surveillancing on them, he seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation. If anyone in my family has a conscience left, it's him." Rachel was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and took my hand. "Jemima, I'm so sorry. I should have kept looking for you. I should have trusted my instincts." "You trusted my family. That's what normal people do. But now I need you to trust me, and I need your help to make sure they understand exactly what they've done." "What are you planning?" For the first time since Colonel Foster had told me about the wedding, I smiled. I'm planning to give them exactly what they gave me, the shock of a lifetime. The next evening, I sat in my rental car outside the hardware store where my father worked part-time since retiring from his main job. James Thompson, Navy veteran, had always been the steady one in our family. While my mother fluttered and Sophia dramatized, Dad fixed things quietly and methodically. If anyone would have questioned the official story of my disappearance, it would have been him. I watched him lock up the store and walk to his truck, the same battered Ford he'd driven since I was in high school. He moved differently than I remembered. Slower, older, carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. Whatever guilt he felt about my supposed death was wearing on him. I followed him home and waited until he was alone on the back porch, drinking his evening beer like he had every night of my childhood. Then I called his cell phone from a number he wouldn't recognize. "Hello?" His voice was cautious. "Dad, it's me." The beer bottle slipped from his hand and shattered on the porch steps. "Jemima?" "It's me, Dad." I heard him breathing heavily, then the sound of a chair scraping as he sat down hard. "You're alive. Jesus Christ, you're alive." "I've been alive this whole time. I just got back from Afghanistan yesterday." "But we..." He stopped, and I could hear him thinking, processing. "We were told you were missing. Sophia said the military confirmed you were missing, presumed dead." Sophia lied. The silence stretched between us, filled with 18 months of deception finally cracking open. "I never believed it," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "I never believed you were dead. The story never made sense. You're too smart, too careful. But Grace and Sophia were so certain, and they had documents, phone calls from official-sounding people." "What kind of documents?" "Medical records showing PTSD treatment, communication from someone claiming to be your commanding officer saying you'd gone AWOL, phone calls from people who said they were military chaplains confirming you died in a roadside bombing."
My blood went cold. The level of deception was staggering. "Dad, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I never went AWOL. I never had PTSD treatment. I've been writing letters and sending packages home for 18 months through official military channels. I have documentation of every communication I attempted." Another long silence. Then, the wedding. Oh, God, the wedding. "You were there." "I was there. I watched my daughter marry your fiancé while believing my other daughter was dead." His voice cracked. "What kind of father does that make me?" "It makes you a man who was lied to by people he trusted." I should have fought harder. I should have demanded proof, real proof. But Grace was so broken up about losing you, and Sophia seemed so fragile, and Alexander was devastated. I thought I was being supportive. I could hear him crying now, quiet sobs that he was trying to muffle. My father had cried exactly twice in my memory, when his own father died and when I left for basic training. Hearing him break down over my supposed death was both heartbreaking and infuriating. "Dad, I need to see you, alone. Can you meet me?" "Where are you?" "The old quarry. You know the place." The quarry was where he'd taught me to fish, where we'd gone to talk when I'd been struggling with the decision to enlist. It was our place, somewhere Sophia had never been interested in going.
I'll be there in 20 minutes. I got there first and waited by the water's edge, watching the sunset paint the still surface gold and red. When I heard his truck, my heart hammered against my ribs. This would be the first family member to see me alive, the first test of whether any relationship could be salvaged from this wreckage. He walked down the path slowly, as if he was afraid I might be a hallucination. When he saw me standing there in my civilian clothes, very much alive and solid, he stopped 20 feet away and just stared. It's really you. It's really me. Then he was running, crushing me in a hug that smelled like motor oil and Old Spice and home. He held me like he was afraid I might disappear again, and for a moment, I was his little girl again, safe in his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered into my hair. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I should have known. I should have fought for you." When we finally broke apart, he looked older than his 57 years old, aged by guilt and grief that had been manufactured by his own family. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. I told him about the deployment, the letters, the chaplain's records. I told him about coming home to discover that my life had been given away to my sister. I told him about the surveillance, the wedding photos, the nursery in my childhood bedroom. With each revelation, his face grew harder, angrier. By the time I finished, he looked like the Navy veteran he'd once been, ready for a fight. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Information. How did this start? Who orchestrated it?" He was quiet for a long moment, thinking back. "It was Sophia. She came to us about 3 months into your deployment, crying, saying she'd been trying to reach you but couldn't get through. She said she'd contacted the military and they'd told her you were missing. She had phone numbers to call, official-sounding people who confirmed her story. And your mother believed her? Your mother wanted to believe her. You know how Grace is. She's always seen Sophia as the fragile one who needs protecting. When Sophia said you were in trouble, Mom went into full crisis mode. And Sophia had answers for everything, solutions for every question. What about Alexander?" Dad's face darkened. "Alexander showed up about a month later, devastated about losing you. He and Sophia comforted each other. At first, it seemed innocent, 2 people grieving the same loss, but then it became something more. And you let it happen. I was outnumbered. Every time I raised doubts, I was told I was in denial, that I was making everyone's grief harder. Sophia even arranged for a grief counselor to talk to me about accepting loss." He shook his head. "She thought of everything." The scope of Sophia's manipulation was breathtaking. She hadn't just stolen my life, she'd engineered the entire scenario, created fake military contacts, manipulated grief counselors, and turned my own parents against their instincts. "Dad, I'm going to expose this. All of it. When I do, it's going to destroy the family as you know it." He nodded grimly. "Good. Because what we have now isn't a family. It's a lie built on the grave of my daughter, who isn't even dead. Will you help me? Tell me what you need." The war room we set up in Rachel's law office looked like something from a crime drama. 3 tables pushed together, covered with documents, timelines, photographs, and evidence bags. Military records from Chaplain Bennett, communication logs from Private Johnson, surveillance photos I'd taken, and financial documents Rachel had pulled using her legal resources. Colonel Foster had driven down from Colorado Springs with an official military advocate, bringing the full weight of the Army's legal department. Seeing my commanding officer in civilian legal office was surreal, but her presence sent a clear message. This wasn't just a family dispute. It was a matter of military justice. "The evidence is overwhelming," she said, gesturing to the timeline we'd constructed on her whiteboard. "Phone records show calls to the Red Cross that were made from Sophia's number, not military sources. Financial records show that your parents received a life insurance payout that they split with Alexander, money that was supposed to go towards your funeral expenses."
Colonel Foster leaned forward. "They committed insurance fraud using a falsified death certificate. That's a federal crime." "How did they get a death certificate?" I asked. "Forged military documentation," the advocate replied. Sophia created fake orders declaring you killed in action, then used those to obtain civilian death certificates. She researched military protocols and terminology to make it convincing. I stared at the copies of the forged documents. They looked official, complete with military seals and signatures that appeared genuine. Sophia had done her homework. "There's more," Rachel said. "Alexander used your joint savings account to pay for their wedding. Legally, he had no right to those funds after your supposed death without going through probate court." "Which he couldn't do without a real death certificate," Colonel Foster added. "So he just spent the money and hoped no one would notice." The advocate spread out additional documents. "We've also documented identity theft. Sophia has been using your social security number to apply for military survivor benefits. She's been collecting death benefits as your grieving sister while simultaneously planning her future with your fiancé." "How much money are we talking about?" "Conservatively, about $60,000 in various death benefits, insurance payouts, and stolen savings." I sat back in my chair, stunned. They hadn't just erased me emotionally, they'd literally profited from my supposed death. "What about the fake military contacts?" I asked. Rachel consulted her notes. "We traced the phone numbers Sophia gave your parents. They're all disposable cell phones registered to fake names. She was playing multiple characters, military liaisons, chaplains, even a grief counselor who specialized in military families. She created an entire fictional network of support to make her lie believable," Colonel Foster said with obvious disgust. "This level of deception requires planning, resources, and a complete absence of conscience." The advocate pulled out a thick folder. "We've prepared criminal charges: wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud. If prosecuted to the full extent of the law, Sophia could face 20 years in federal prison." "And Alexander?" "Accessory to fraud, theft, and conspiracy. He knew the death benefits weren't legitimate, but he spent the money anyway. He's looking at 5 to 10 years. "What about my parents?" Rachel and the advocate exchanged glances. "That's more complicated. Your father appears to have been a victim of the deception rather than a participant. Your mother's role is less clear." I thought about my mother, humming in her garden, planning for grandchildren. She knew. Maybe not the details, but she knew something was wrong and chose not to look too closely. "The evidence suggests she was willfully ignorant rather than actively conspiring," the advocate said carefully. "But she did accept and spend money she knew came from questionable sources." Colonel Foster leaned back in her chair. "Thompson, you need to understand that once we file these charges, there's no going back. Your family will face serious legal consequences. Some of them may go to prison." I looked around the room at the evidence of 18 months of systematic deception and theft. Photos of the wedding that should have been mine, financial records showing how they'd monetized my supposed death, forged military documents that insulted everything I'd sworn to protect. "They made their choices," I said finally. "They chose to erase me, steal from me, and build their happiness on the lie of my death. Now they get to face the consequences." "There's one more thing," Rachel said quietly. "We need to decide how to reveal the truth. We could simply file charges and let them find out through arrests, or we could confront them directly first." "What do you recommend?" "Personally, I think they deserve the same shock they gave you. Let them find out the same way you did, suddenly, publicly, with no time to prepare explanations or excuses." Colonel Foster nodded. "Military justice agrees. They showed no mercy to you. They deserve none in return." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the New Mexico sunset. Tomorrow night was the baby shower Rachel had mentioned, the celebration where Sophia would be surrounded by friends and family, basking in the sympathy and support she'd built through lies. It would be the perfect moment to return from the dead. "Set everything in motion," I said, turning back to the room. "File the charges, contact the authorities, prepare the evidence for trial. Tomorrow night, Sophia gets to meet the ghost she created." "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked. I thought about the nursery in my childhood bedroom, about Alexander kissing Sophia on the porch swing, about my mother proudly discussing her expecting daughter while her other daughter had been forgotten.
I've never been more sure of anything in my life. My father called Sophia that morning with a carefully rehearsed story. He wanted to honor my memory on what would have been my 29th birthday with a family dinner. Just the four of them, him, Mom, Sophia, and Alexander, to remember me properly and maybe start planning some kind of memorial scholarship in my name. I sat in my rental car across the street from my childhood home, watching through the living room window as they gathered around the dinner table. Rachel was positioned at the end of the block with recording equipment, and we had synchronized our watches like the military operation this had become. "She's really laying it on thick," I murmured into my headset, watching Sophia dab at her eyes with a tissue. Through the directional microphone Rachel had provided, I could hear every word. Sophia was saying, her voice trembling with practiced emotion, "I just miss her so much. Sometimes I dream that she's still alive, and I wake up thinking I can call her."
Alexander reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "She would be so proud of everything you've accomplished, the way you've honored her memory, the strength you've shown." My mother nodded vigorously. "Jemima always said you were the strong one, Sophia. She'd be happy knowing you're taking care of all of us." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Even in death, they were rewriting my personality to make Sophia the hero of my story. "What about the memorial scholarship?" my father asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Oh, I've been thinking about that," Sophia said, brightening. "Maybe something for young mothers pursuing education. I know how much Jemima valued learning, and with the baby coming, it feels right." "Young mothers," Alexander agreed. "Jemima would have loved being an aunt." The conversation continued for another hour, each of them taking turns performing their grief while simultaneously celebrating their new life. Sophia talked about baby names, considering Jamie as a middle name to honor me. Alexander discussed work promotions that would help support their growing family. My mother shared her excitement about becoming a grandmother. Not once did anyone question the official story. Not once did anyone wonder if maybe, just maybe, the military had made a mistake. "I have something to say," my father announced as they were clearing dessert plates. The table went quiet. Through my binoculars, I could see Sophia tense slightly. "I've been thinking about Jemima's disappearance, about the timeline, the communications, the way everything happened." "Dad," Sophia said quickly, "we've been through this. The grief counselor said questioning the facts would only make it harder to heal." "I know what the grief counselor said, but I keep thinking about military protocols, about how these things usually work, and something doesn't add up." Alexander shifted uncomfortably. "What do you mean?" "I mean that in my day, when a soldier went missing, there were procedures, searches, investigations, formal notifications. But with Jemima, everything came through unofficial channels, family notifications from people we never met in person." "The military works differently now," Sophia said, but I could hear the strain in her voice. "Does it? Because I called the base yesterday, just to ask some questions about memorial procedures." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see Sophia's face go pale even from across the street. "What did they tell you?" my mother asked. "They told me that Staff Sergeant Jemima Thompson completed her deployment successfully and returned to base yesterday." The crash of breaking dishes carried clearly through the night air. Sophia had knocked over her water glass, and the sound seemed to break whatever spell had held the room. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it? Because it would explain a lot of things, like why I never felt at peace about her death, like why the military documentation you showed us had formatting errors, like why you seemed to know exactly what to do at every step of this process." Alexander was on his feet now. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that maybe we should have asked harder questions from the beginning." Through my headset, I heard Rachel's voice. "This is it. Time to go." But I stayed in my car, watching my family finally confront the possibility that everything they'd built was a lie, watching Sophia realize that her perfect deception was crumbling, watching my mother and Alexander grapple with the implications of what my father was suggesting. "We should call the base," my mother said finally, "if there's any chance she's alive." "No," Sophia said quickly, "we can't. What if she comes back and finds out about us, about the baby?" And there it was, the admission I'd been waiting for. Not concern for my well-being, not joy at the possibility of my survival, but fear about facing the consequences of their choices.
She's going to find out anyway, and when she does, we better hope she's more forgiving than we deserve. I started my car and drove away, leaving them to contemplate the wreckage of their carefully constructed lie. Tomorrow was the baby shower. Tomorrow, they would get their answer. The baby shower was everything I'd expected from Sophia's social media posts. Pink and gold decorations, an elaborate cake, perfectly coordinated party fairs. My mother's house had been transformed into a celebration of new life and new beginnings, filled with friends and neighbors who'd supported the family through their tragic loss. I stood outside the front door in a simple black dress, holding a gift bag containing printed copies of every piece of evidence we'd compiled. Through the window, I could see Sophia holding court in the living room, one hand on her pregnant belly, accepting congratulations and sympathy in equal measure. "And we know Jemima is watching over us," she was saying to Mrs. Patterson from down the street. "This baby is proof that love can triumph over tragedy." I rang the doorbell. My mother answered, her face flushed with hostess excitement that drained away the moment she saw me. The gift bag slipped from her hands and scattered its contents across the threshold. Military records, communication logs, photographs of packages I'd sent home. "Hello, Mom." The sound that came from her throat wasn't quite a scream, wasn't quite a sob. Behind her, conversation in the living room faltered as guests sensed something was wrong. "Jemima?" Sophia's voice carried from the living room, uncertain and questioning. I stepped over the scattered evidence and walked toward the sound of my sister's voice. The living room fell silent as I appeared in the doorway, very much alive and completely uninvited to my own nephew's baby shower.
Sophia stood frozen in the center of the room, one hand still protectively over her belly, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Alexander sat slumped in the corner chair, looking like he might be sick. "Surprise," I said calmly. "Sorry I'm late to the party." The silence stretched until Mrs. Henderson, bless her heart, broke it with typical neighborhood confusion. "But Dare, we thought you were bad." "So did I until yesterday," I replied, my eyes never leaving Sophia's face. "Funny thing about being dead while you're actually serving overseas, it makes coming home quite the shock." "Overseas?" someone whispered. "But she's been missing." "I've been in Afghanistan for 18 months, I said clearly, letting my voice carry to every corner of the room. "Serving my country while my family held my memorial service and divided up my belongings." Sophia finally found her voice. "We thought the military said you were missing in action." "Which military?" I asked, pulling my phone from my purse. "Because I have Chaplain Bennett on speed dial, and he's been helping me send letters and care packages home every month. Would you like me to call him?" "That's impossible," Alexander said, standing up abruptly. "We had official confirmation. From home." I pulled up printed copies of the forged documents you created, from the disposable phones you used to impersonate military personnel, from the grief counselor you hired to convince Dad he was in denial. The room erupted in gasps and whispered conversations. I could see phones coming out as guests began to realize they were witnessing something much more dramatic than a baby shower. I don't know what you're talking about," Sophia said, but her voice shook. "I'm talking about the $60,000 in death benefits you collected, the insurance money you split with Alexander, the joint savings account he emptied to pay for your wedding." I set the financial records on the gift table. "I'm talking about 18 months of systematic fraud while I was writing you letters from a war zone." My mother sank into the nearest chair. "The letters. Every month, Mom. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, care packages addressed to this house. All delivered, all signed for. While you were planning my memorial service." Father Patrick O'Connor, who had been standing quietly near the refreshment table, stepped forward. "Jemima, is this true? You've been alive this entire time? Ask Chaplain Bennett, ask my commanding officer, ask the Red Cross, or ask my sister how she managed to forge military death certificates convincing enough to fool an insurance company." Sophia's composure finally cracked. I thought you were really dead. The communication stopped. You never responded to messages. Because you blocked them all." I pulled out Sam's screenshots.
every social media message, every friend request, every attempt I made to contact anyone from home. You convinced everyone I wanted no contact, then used that isolation to fake my death. The baby shower guests were backing toward the exits now, uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding before them. But a few lingered, phones recording, witnesses to the complete collapse of Sophia's carefully constructed narrative. "What about the baby?" someone called out. I looked at Sophia's pregnant belly, at the child who would grow up never knowing their aunt had been erased to make room for their existence. "The baby is innocent," I said quietly, "but their parents are criminals who built their marriage on the grave of a sister who wasn't actually dead." Alexander was crying now, quiet sobs that shook his whole body. "Jemima, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We thought—" "You thought it was convenient. You thought it was easier than dealing with an 18-month separation. You thought you could start fresh and no one would ever know." "What happens now?" my mother whispered. I looked around the room at the pink and gold decorations, at the presents for a baby who would soon learn that their family was built on lies, at the guests who were already composing social media posts about the most dramatic baby shower in town history. "Now you face the consequences," I said simply. "Federal agents will be here in an hour to arrest Sophia and Alexander for fraud. Mom, you'll need a lawyer. Dad," I looked at my father, who stood in the doorway looking simultaneously relieved and heartbroken. "Dad, we'll talk later." I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back to Sophia one last time. "You wanted to erase me and take my life. Instead, you've lost yours. I hope it was worth it." The arrest footage went viral within hours. Someone at the baby shower had live-streamed the entire confrontation, and by morning, #BabyShowerBetrayal was trending across social media platforms. The story had everything the internet loved: military service, family betrayal, dramatic revelations, and the satisfying downfall of sympathetic fraudsters. I watched Alexander's perp walk from my hotel room, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction as he stumbled into the back of a federal vehicle. Sophia's arrest had been more dramatic. She'd claimed pregnancy complications and been taken to the hospital first, where doctors confirmed she was fine, but recommended psychiatric evaluation. "The media wants to interview you," Rachel said, scrolling through messages on her phone. "CNN, Fox, NBC. Everyone wants the betrayed soldier's story." "Not yet," I said. "Let the legal process play out first." 3 days later, Alexander posted bail and immediately filed for divorce. He'd hired an expensive attorney who was painting him as another victim of Sophia's manipulation, claiming he had genuinely believed I was dead and had been emotionally vulnerable. It was a smart strategy, but the financial records told a different story.
Sophia remained in custody. Her bail had been set at $500,000, far more than the family could afford, especially with their assets frozen as part of the fraud investigation. She'd refused all interview requests and fired 2 lawyers before settling on a public defender who specialized in white-collar crime. My mother called every day, sobbing apologies that I listened to but didn't return. She'd hired her own attorney after learning she could face charges for knowingly spending fraudulent death benefits. The scholarship fund she'd started in my memory would have to be dissolved and the money returned. But it was the 4th day after the revelation that brought the conversation I'd been both dreading and anticipating. My father knocked on my hotel room door at sunset, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking like he'd aged a decade in the past week. "Can we talk?" he asked. We sat on the small balcony overlooking the highway, watching traffic move past in the fading light. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "I should have known," he said finally. "Military father, military daughter. I should have recognized that nothing about Sophia's story made sense." "You were grieving. Grief makes people accept things they'd normally question." "Don't make excuses for me, Jemima. I failed you. When you needed me to fight for the truth, I chose family peace instead." I studied his profile in the dim light. "What happens now, Dad? With us, I mean." "That's up to you. I'll understand if you can't forgive me. I'll understand if you never want to see me again."
I don't want revenge against you, I said quietly. But I can't pretend things can go back to how they were. That family doesn't exist anymore. He nodded. What do you need from me? I need you to testify truthfully at Sophia's trial. I need you to help Mom understand that enablement has consequences. And I need you to accept that rebuilding trust takes time. And after the trial? I thought about the Veteran Support Center idea that had been forming in my mind, about using my experience to help other veteran families avoid similar betrayals. After the trial, we'll see. But Dad, I reached over and took his hand. Thank you for finally asking the right questions, even if it was 18 months too late. He squeezed my hand. Your grandmother would be proud of how you handled this. She always said the quiet ones were the most dangerous when pushed too far. Grandmother never had to deal with social media and federal fraud charges. No, but she knew about justice, and she knew about family loyalty. Real family loyalty, not the fake kind your mother and Sophia practiced. We sat in comfortable silence as the stars appeared, two military veterans who understood duty and honor, finally on the same side of a battle that had torn our family apart. Tomorrow would bring more lawyers, more media attention, more consequences for choices made 18 months ago. But tonight, I had my father back, and that felt like the first real victory since coming home from war. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of the Thompson Brooks Veterans Support Center, watching Ethan adjust the bronze plaque that bore both our names. The building had once been a furniture store, but we'd transformed it into something that mattered. A place where military families could get real help with communication, counseling, and crisis intervention. The plaque's crooked, I said, straightening it myself. Ethan laughed, the easy sound that had become the soundtrack to my healing. We'd met during the trial proceedings when Colonel Foster recommended his veteran counseling services. What started as professional therapy had evolved into something deeper, a relationship built on honesty instead of lies, understanding instead of manipulation. Control freak, he teased, wrapping his arms around me from behind. The opening ceremony starts in an hour. Everything's ready. Through the front windows, I could see the small crowd gathering, local news crews, veteran organizations, military families who'd heard about our work. And there, near the back, my father in his dress blues, standing straighter than he had in months. The trial had ended 3 weeks ago. Sophia received 8 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Alexander got 4 years and would likely serve 2 with good behavior. My mother received probation and community service, along with a permanent reminder that enablement has consequences. And what happened to the baby? It had a happy ending and fabulous justice for Jemima.
She nodded. My sister married my boyfriend while I was overseas. Said they thought I died in a training accident. I felt Ethan's hand on my shoulder, steadying me as the familiar rage flickered and died. This was why we'd built this place, so other soldiers wouldn't face betrayal alone. Come on, I said to Private Martinez. Let me show you what we do here. As I led her toward the counseling offices, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. The woman looking back was different from the one who'd stepped off that transport plane 6 months ago. Stronger, harder in some ways, but also more purposeful. I'd learned that betrayal could destroy you or forge you into something unbreakable. The thing about being declared dead, I told Private Martinez as we walked, is that when you come back to life, you get to decide what kind of life you want to build. Behind us, Chaplain Bennett was setting up folding chairs for the opening ceremony. He'd retired from active duty to join our staff, bringing his meticulous record-keeping skills to help other families maintain communication during deployments. And what kind of life did you decide to build? Private Martinez asked. I looked around the center, at the communication stations where families could video chat securely, at the legal aid office where Rachel worked, at the counseling rooms where Ethan helped veterans process betrayal and trauma, at the wall of photos celebrating service members who'd found their way home.
One where betrayal ends with me, I said simply. Where other families don't have to learn the hard way that love isn't always louder than lies. The opening ceremony would begin soon. My father would introduce me to the crowd, speaking about duty and honor and the bonds between soldiers. Ethan would explain our mission to help military families stay connected across distance and deployment. I would tell my story, not for revenge anymore, but as a warning and a promise. But first, I had work to do. Private Martinez needed help, and helping her was the best revenge I could imagine against everyone who tried to erase me. Every family we kept together, every soldier who came home to genuine love instead of fabricated grief, was proof that I'd built something lasting from the wreckage of my old life. Welcome to the Thompson Brooks Center, I told her. Let's make sure your family knows you're alive.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.